In yesterday's reading, we heard about servants needing to be ready for the return of their master. In today's reading, we hear a continuation of this story, firstly with the question Peter asks, and then the response of Jesus. From Luke chapter 12, verses 41 to 48. Peter asked, "Lord, are you telling this parable to us or to everyone?" The Lord answered, "Who then is the faithful and wise manager whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose the servant says to himself, 'My master is taking a long time in coming,' and then he begins to beat the other servants, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He'll cut him to pieces and he'll assign him a place with the unbelievers. The servant who knows the master's will and does not get ready, or does not do what the master wants, will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with a few blows. For everyone who's been given much, much will be demanded. And for the one who's been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." It's hardly surprising that Peter asked the question he did. Are you telling this parable to us or to everyone? Because so many times throughout the Gospels, we hear of times when Jesus is surrounded by a crowd and Jesus is either addressing the disciples or it says he's talking to the crowd. So Peter's question is completely understandable and he just wants to clear that up. But rather than giving Peter a direct answer, Jesus answers the question with another two parables. And today's is about head servants who have the task for caring for servants under them. Rather than speaking to the crowd, it seems as though Jesus is indicating that these next two parables apply to the 12 as church leaders, and then by extension to all those who have leadership responsibility in churches. Now, while some people don't consider themselves to be in leadership in the church, we can all be role models. We're all representatives of Christ if we call ourselves Christians. Therefore, we all have some leadership role to play. We all have a part. 1 Peter chapter 2 speaks of us being living stones, being built up in a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. But that we're also a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that we may proclaim the praises of him who called us out of darkness into his marvellous light. We're called to be those faithful and wise managers. This is a person that Jesus is referring to is not doing something who is innovative or creative or ostentatious. He's just doing his job, his duty, day after day, without fail. His quality is faithfulness, dependable, and he can be relied upon. And the reward is promotion, the opportunity to have more responsibility. And equally, those who choose to act irresponsibly or without discipline will be treated accordingly. When we're presented with this opposite, the person acting irresponsibly or without discipline, this is a person who lives for himself and not for the master. He neglects his responsibilities to those who he is to care for. He acts selfishly and he wants the luxurious lifestyle of his master. So how does this compare with the world that we see today? Are we content to see others going short while we look after number one? If we're living for ourselves, we can't at the same time be under discipline as a faithful servant to the master. Now, while many of us don't consider ourselves to live lives of luxury compared to so many in the world, we all do. How much more would we be willing to give up before we said, enough, I'm not going any further. I want to look after myself. A couple of years ago, some statistics were produced for us to consider a different perspective. If you have food in your fridge, clothes on your back, a roof over your head and a place to sleep, you are richer than 75% of the world. If you have money in the bank, your wallet and some spare change, you're among the top 8% of the world's wealthy. If you woke up this morning with more health than illness, you're more blessed than the 1 million people who will not survive this week. If you've never experienced the danger of battle, the agony of imprisonment or torture, or the horrible pangs of starvation, you're luckier than 500 million people alive and suffering. If you can read, you're more fortunate than 3 billion people in the world who cannot read at all. We can all serve God's purpose in our own generation. We can choose to be a faithful servant. We can choose to be trustworthy, to be trusted by those around us, to be trusted by God. We will make mistakes. We might fail from time to time, but we shouldn't quit. We can't give up. And if we've got more than we need, we should share it with others rather than being greedy. Our future is dependent on the choices that we make. Jesus is the master. We are the servants. Some are in positions of leadership, but we've all been given responsibilities to do by Jesus until he returns. Christ will come again, and that could be at any time. We don't know when. So are you ready? Are you focused? Are you prepared? Or are you more concerned on living life in this moment, taking little care for those around? And if so, are you prepared to face the consequences? We all have a choice to make. Jesus is the master. We are the servants. I do hope that you choose the right choice. If you're not sure how to go about making those decisions to follow Jesus, please do get in touch. Spend some time talking to God. Ask him to change your life. Ask him to transform the unjust structures in society. And also trust that you have a part to play in that. And one day, Christ will return. Will you hear him saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant"? Amen.